This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And welcome to this part 2 of a special edition of A Different Perspective. I'm here with John Greenewald and Tony Bragalia. We've been talking about Tony's receipt of a number of documents through FOIA that suggest to him evidence, proof that the Pentagon has admitted that they have alien debris and they've been doing reverse engineering on it. And John's contrary view that the documents are interesting and detail research into some very extraordinary things, but the connection between Roswell and aliens is not evidenced in the documents. I think that's where we are on that. When we went away, Tony was talking about his research and his ideas on this, and I had to interrupt him because we had to take the break here. So, Tony, if you'd like to carry on where you were.
Yeah, it refreshed my memory. We were in a new program here, so we left off, Kevin, discussing specifically which area.
You had been going on about talking to the CEOs of companies and how your research has led you into the conclusions where you are.
Yes. And in the area of technology transfer and how material from the black world finds itself in the wide open in the public. And I think that I had discussed earlier Philip Corso, a known hoaxer who had been high up in government in the 1960s and who had maintained that he was involved in technology transfer of materials that had been recovered at Roswell and brought them into the real world. And I think that some folks have said, well, gee, your thesis here sounds very Corso-like. And in fact, when I hear that, I cringe because there really is technology transfer that goes on all the time in the real world and has nothing to do with people like Philip Corso or how he says it goes down. Because in point of fact, a lot of things are top secret, but eventually they do make their way into the real world. They have to. That's the whole purpose. But it's the way in which they reach that status, the way in which they get into the real world, the time it takes to do so, and the compartmentalization that goes on in order to have it done in a way that doesn't jeopardize security. And in many ways, I think this is exactly what has happened with the material that I've received. This material can easily be said by a Pentagon spokesperson to be related to weaponry. On the other hand, it can also relate to UFOs because of its UFO-like characteristics. So
but Tony,
it's very easy. Yeah.
You had mentioned Bob Bigelow as having created some facilities, I guess, in Las Vegas to do research, reverse engineering on these materials?
To store the material for study.
Okay, and Bob Bigelow has denied this.
Right, and George Knapp, in a very recent interview with Bob Bigelow, which is predictably excellent and provided much insight into many of the things people like me want to know more about, talks about that. Robert Bigelow has an interview with George Knapp on MysteryWire.com. And here we can hear Bigelow talk incredibly about James Lakatsky, who is the rocket scientist and UFO point person at the DIA, who was the program manager for the program that released the documents that I received. And and I can and will get to you the YouTube URL because we want to reference things. But Bigelow met with Lakatsky. Lakatsky said some incredible things. Bigelow says this on tape in George Knapp's recent interview. Bigelow's an interesting character. He says many things to many people. Sometimes
Okay,
he
Tony.
contradicts.
Tony, let's give John a chance to step in here. John.
Sure.
Yeah. So, thanks for bringing me back. So, I mean, a couple.
I didn't want you to go to sleep, so there you go.
No, and I appreciate that. Although I could use some with my kids, they never let me sleep. So, that being said, a couple things. Tony had made reference to the science, and I am not a scientist. I've never claimed to be one. And if Tony wants to school me on his scientific background, that's all fine. But my point stands with the fact that the science that I'm hearing about does not necessarily connect it to alien material. The government has done fringe research on all sorts of different things for many, many decades, including what we're talking about and even far beyond it, and that doesn't necessarily make it alien. But if we are talking about experience, there is one thing that I do have experience about. I never pat myself on the back, and I'm not doing that now. But with Tony's argument about his science, and that's what is his main brunt of his argument is what we're dealing here with here scientifically. My background is FOIA. And the reason why I bring that up is because out of 10,000 requests, I can cite numerous examples of what then has become the foundation of Tony's argument, which is, and I'm paraphrasing, but my FOIA request was clear as day. I mentioned UAPs, ergo this is all UAP related. And in my experience, that is not how the FOIA works. There is what I call exactly responsive and loosely responsive. I touched upon that in the last couple of segments we did on this program. But to drive the point home again, I know Tony doesn't want to deal with this, but I will ask the question again. I can cite numerous examples, one of which is in the article that I published that I know upset Tony. And I know he didn't like it, so he has seen this and has had ample time to address it. I can cite a FOIA request where I said nothing but UFO material. That's what I was looking for. And in response, I get World War II schematics for a flying wing design from the Nazi Horton brothers. Now, I'm beating this dead horse because the foundation of Tony's argument has been that leads the way to his scientific background to prove this is alien, has been this FOIA request and the way that it's worded. And how is it that I can cite not only this Army example, but actually numerous ones where I ask for something, but what I get is loosely responsive? Now, why was the Horton brother flying wing design loosely responsive? Well, to be short, they called it a flying saucer in some circles. And to the FOIA action officer, they wanted to make sure that although they didn't think that this was exactly responsive to what I was looking for, they were making an effort to be as transparent as possible, not play word games, and try and fulfill my request. So the foundational argument of this that then leads into the scientific debate, and to be honest with you, I don't care about the scientific debate simply because there is so much science out there on this very stuff that is being argued. If you're ready to make the argument that all of this stems to alien, then that is Philip Corso-like. And as much as you don't want to admit it, those are the same claims that we've heard for decades, but never had any type of confirmation of that. So going back to my real world examples of the experience and background that I've had, why is it that your foundation relies on something that I can show you, but you don't want to look at it, but I can show you that there's proof of what I'm saying? Why can't you acknowledge that?
Tony.
Okay. Okay.
Tony, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Those weren't crickets. That was actually the sound of incredulity. I just can't believe what I'm hearing. In a similar way than when I talked to you on your show a couple of days ago, those weren't crickets. That was just me saying, wow. I couldn't believe it. I don't know, but, I've said this before. If I order a turkey dinner and I get back a hot dog, that's not what I ordered, ma'am. And that's kind of what it sounds like to me. I'm almost sounding like we're in some sort of Kellyanne Conway alternate facts world here where up is down and down is up. I asked for UFO material, and gosh, I thought that's what I got. But I can actually speak more directly to all of this. That's because I talked to the guy that sent to me the documents. Now, I would ask you, John, did you phone the individual that sent you the Horton Brothers documents?
Yes.
Okay, and you talked to him a couple times on that?
Yep.
Okay, well, that's good because I did too with Steve Tominski at the DIA, and you weren't privy to it, and unfortunately I wasn't able to record it because, as you and I both know, we can't really record when we're not being told, and I don't think he would want to have been recorded. But for what I got from him, and which I alluded to in the emails that you've received, you've read, is that he understood I was referring to UFOs and UAPs. We didn't even talk about weapons. Yes, it was a weapons program. We talked about acronyms for weapons programs, but it was as clear as day and as clear as I'm being with both of you right now on the phone. Yeah, folks, I'm on the phone. Is that we were referring to UFOs. I wasn't talking about hot dogs or turkey dinners. You know, I guess I just don't get it.
Well,
when I hear from you, when I hear from you that we're talking about something completely different than what was requested, it's almost like you and I are looking at the same documents, the same emails, and we're really just looking at totally different things. It's amazing to me, but, you know, isn't that the way of the world today? That, you know, 50% of us look at things one way and 50% are completely different, and we're looking at the same things. So I think what we need to do maybe is look at who's given us this material, who's saying that this is weapons. And John keeps on talking about Susan Koff, the Pentagon spokesperson who has propagated all of this misinformation. And I'd like to talk about her and about John and about her response to John and his associates relative to these documents. I think it's real important that we talk about where John's getting his information from and who this woman is.
Okay, lead us down that path a little bit.
You got it.
A little bit.
Sure. Yeah, you got it. John's been receiving information, and people have been receiving information from a woman named Susan Koff. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Goff.
There you go. It rhymes with cough. Susan Goff. And she is the Pentagon spokesperson, and officially her title is Pentagon spokesperson and strategic planner. And this is the woman who has told folks that this documents that I received related to weapons programs only and not to UFOs, as the DIA said to me. So interestingly enough, I did a deep dive on this woman because she's really a lot of the problem here. And it's not an unfamiliar name to people, to listeners of your show, Kevin. But she's the one that released the statement that she's aware of me and of the social chatter around my article.
Tony, Tony, let me break
go
in
ahead.
here. We'll get back to Susan Koff right after this, but I got to take a break.
You got it.
I am here with Tony Bragalia. His website is www.ufoexplorations.com. UFO explorations, all one word, all lowercase. And I'm with John Greenewald, he of the Black Vault fame, and his website, of course, is www.blackvault.com, I believe. As I look at the page, blackvault.com. Oh, the Black Vault. www.theblackvault.com. There we go. Mine is, of course, www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. When we come back, we'll get a little bit more information about Susan Goff and what she had to say and what her responses were to some of this hoopla that was created by the release of these documents. So we'll talk about that with John Greenewald and Tony Bragalia right after this, so please stick around. joined by Tony Bragalia of the UFOexplorations.com website and John Greenewald of theblackvault.com website. I want to make sure I got The Black Vault in there because I kind of botched it in the last segment there. We were talking about the Pentagon spokesman who had responded to some of, I guess, the queries from various people about what Tony had said when he received these documents. And I interrupted you, Tony, to go away to the break. So please, Tony, pick it up there.
Yeah, she actually, it's a Pentagon spokesperson, Susan Koff, had very little to say to me, in fact, nothing so far, but to others, and that was kind of strange in and of itself, but she said that, again, this release by the DIA really had nothing to do with UFOs, but rather had to do with an advanced weapons program. And technically, she's correct, given the title of the program, but she's entirely incorrect. And in fact, she's lying. And I learned so much about her, and I know that John has dealt with her over a long period of time. And I think this is an area that maybe we can also talk about together, John, because she's an interesting woman, and I know you probably know a lot about her. And I've learned a lot about her, and she's the one that's kind of the thorn in my side. Can you imagine, or maybe you can, being talked about and being told that you didn't get what you really got, and you see it with your own eyes, but a woman, a stranger that you don't even know, says, no, that's not what we've sent to you. We sent you something on weapons, not on UFOs. And it's extraordinary to me because she had no involvement in the process of fulfillment of the request, only heard about it much later. I'm sure perhaps had heard about it a little bit because of the nature of her work, but didn't get involved in the processing of it. She had to react. And right now I think she's plotting her next public move on this because, yes, Kevin, she's selectively communicated with others inquiring about this issue, but it's appalling that she's ignored me. And, I've had that happen before to me where people write things about me or even do videos about me, but they don't even call me or contact me before they do that.
Well, Tony,
In this case, don't worry. This case, she's plotting her next move while she ignores me. She has referred to me as social chatter. I guess I've been called worse.
Okay, Tony, let's give John a chance. John, you know the woman.
Well, I was going to tell you a little bit about what she was doing, and
Tony,
a little bit about what she's planning for you. Yeah.
Tony, it's John's turn.
You got
John,
it.
Tell me what you can about the woman.
Sure, and I'm going to resign to the fact that respectfully, Tony just will not address the foundational argument that he is putting forward, the fact that I can cite numerous examples of why what he is saying is not true. And I'm sorry, I have to bring that up again, because that is the foundation of what he is saying. That
John?
These accusations, no, it leads into Susan Goff.
Okay. Go ahead, John.
So it leads into Susan Goff simply because if he doesn't want to address that whole argument falls apart. What Tony is trying to say about Susan Goff is she's ignoring Tony, but talking behind his back, and that is not necessarily true. I went to Susan Goff as a spokesperson because who speaks for the DOD is Susan Goff on these issues. It's not that I want to talk to her, it's that I have to. So there's a protocol for how they react to final determination of FOIA requests. In this particular instance, Tony's. And once the action officer made the final determination, that action officer does not represent the agency on any disputes. The action officer does not head the appeal, and the action officer is not the attorney should it go to judicial review. They have different departments and different people. In various instances, depending upon the case and the agency, you will either talk with the lead FOIA officer for that particular agency, a spokesperson for that agency, or in this particular case, the DOD as a whole. As we all know, the DIA is part of the DOD. So therefore, everything got funneled to Susan Goff. Now, why did she respond to me? Well, one thing that I saw that was pretty evident was Tony, by his own admission, can get fairly heated. And in reference to that, in that DIA back and forth between Tony was references to a lawsuit. So I had asked Tony about this, and he confirmed that he threatened a lawsuit if he was not going to be treated appropriately, and through FOIA, that is, in the eyes of the...
I didn't threaten, but we'll get to that.
Well, okay. I was gonna ask you about that, Tony.
Yes. Well, let him speak, and I will speak right to that directly.
Tony, it's my show. We'll do it my way.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought he was still talking, Kevin.
John, go ahead.
So when you tell a FOIA officer before you even get a final determination that you're going to file a lawsuit, the phraseology, the expression, whatever you want to call it, is yes, you're threatening a lawsuit if they don't do X, Y, and Z. To the eyes of a FOIA officer, that's where it becomes potentially problematic. They don't want to see that just as much as FOIA requesters don't want to pay for that. And so they are going to kind of try and get around that. And that's what leads me to my whole argument is not only does the foundation not hold any weight whatsoever, but on top of that, when you start using that type of language, the FOIA officer just wants to be done with it. I'm not speaking for Steve by any means. I'm just talking about that's an approach that's not very welcomed. So when I hear that Tony's not getting a response from the spokesperson, well, it doesn't surprise me, because if that language is being kind of bantered around, she doesn't have to respond to me or Kevin or Tony or anybody. She really doesn't. She does have an obligation to some extent, but not to us. She just doesn't. So it doesn't surprise me that she ignored Kevin Tony. And on top of that, yeah, there's an insinuation that I'm somehow working with the Pentagon so I can get these FOIA dumps of material. Well, as Kevin can attest to, I have fought for decades in some instances for these records. So I don't just wait around for them to send me material and I'm in cahoots with them. I fight, and I fight hard. So that insinuation is wrong. But going back to the Susan thing,
John, let me ask you a question.
Sense.
Have you ever filed suit or suggested a lawsuit in response to a FOIA request that maybe didn't come through?
No, but I have done numerous appeals. And I have received documents that have never seen the light of day, many tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of previously top secret, and classified records, and have gotten that a long way. So the saying that you're going to threaten a lawsuit and having that as a tactic is not one that works. And in fact, it's not really an everyday occurrence when it comes to the FOIA, simply because if you play your cards right, it's not necessarily needed.
So you're suggesting that the lawsuit may have ended the communication between Tony and Susan Goff?
When it came to the spokesperson Susan Goff, yes, now again, this is an opinion. I'm not speaking for the Pentagon, obviously, but yes, I believe that would play a role in her going, okay, I'm not going to deal with this. And quite frankly, I don't blame her. When it comes to the FOIA officer, my answer is different. I believe a FOIA officer would want to circumvent the appeal, which would then go to a judicial review. Why a lawsuit would be brought up before a final determination is made, that's not how the FOIA works. But regardless, when a FOIA officer hears that, they're just going to try and get it done and over with. And that's not in my opinion, a very conducive method to using the FOIA. You may get your response a little quicker, maybe, I don't know. But it just obviously is a cause for more confusion.
Tony.
Yes, jaw dropped. I have to kind of recover here. The use of the word threaten is telling. John uses the word threatening a lawsuit. I would say initiate a lawsuit.
What's the difference?
And, I'm going to tell you in just a second here. The word threat has a connotation of evil intent. My interest is in extracting information legally and lawfully, and it's amazing to me that John has never had a lawsuit. Perhaps his problems with FOIA have been resolved through other means, and he didn't get to that point. But for him to characterize a lawsuit to secure information from the government, to me, is stunning. folks do this all the time. In fact, I consulted two law firms in the D.C. area that do just that, preeminent law firms, to help me if I needed to get to that point. And
Tony,
for him to
Tony, John wasn't suggesting that people hadn't sued on the basis of FOIA. He was merely suggesting that it's not necessarily the best path to follow before you get through the appeal process.
Well, gee, I think he was characterizing it as threatening and that it bothered the sensibilities of Sue, which is interesting, too, in that, no, the first time I wrote to Sue, I never threatened her with a lawsuit, if that's what you want to say, threaten. I didn't even mention a lawsuit. It was the second time that I emailed her. And there's a huge difference. She ignored me the first time, John.
I've got to tell you, Tony, I have been threatened with lawsuits my entire ufological
No, I
career.
say I did not threaten this woman with a lawsuit.
Tony, listen to me. I have been threatened by lawsuits. I take it, even though they say if you don't do such and such, a lawsuit will be filed. That's a threat. If you don't respond in kind, we'll talk to attorneys. That's a threat. I'm telling you that in my entire ufological career, it's not a good year if I haven't been threatened at least once or twice by a lawsuit of some nature. And so I think that you're splitting a fine hair here when you suggest you didn't threaten.
No, it's hugely different. It's hugely different to sue an individual, a personal individual, than it is to sue a government agency for information. If I try to sue Kevin Randle because he took money from me, that's wholly different than me initiating a lawsuit to a government agency to secure information that's lawfully due me. I mean, to make the analogy is, I don't see it. But in any event, the central point is that Sue didn't get back to me. John is correct, though, and points out well that the FOIA officer, Steve, was very, very communicative with me. And yes, I did say to him, gee, I don't want this to go to a lawsuit because I'm getting this weird thing from you about me having requested an amendment to my request, and I never did that. And we talked about that, and he said, Tony, I get calls all the time from all kind of people threatening all kind of things. I'm still going to work with you. He was a delight. And again, this is the issue I'm having with John. This is the issue I'm having with other folks. I, again, had the benefit of speaking with this individual, as confirmed by my reference to the conversations with him in my emails, in my article. And he was very understanding of what I was looking for. The fact that we talked about a lawsuit, if it didn't go through. Gee, I got to tell you something, though. Once I start mentioning lawsuit, within just a couple months, I got what I was looking for. Isn't that interesting?
Well, Tony, let me break in here. John,
yeah, but I still want to get back to Sue. I want to still get back to Sue because we kind of diverted there.
John, I'll let you respond when we come back from the break, but I got to take a break here. So I know you're there, John, so I'll be back to you. The websites are ufoexplorations.com. That's Tony's website, where he's published his articles about his experiences with gathering this material and how it's gone about. John's is theblackvault.com, which is loaded with, I think, 2 million plus documents relating to UFOs and other aspects of interesting things, including the FBI files on UFO researchers and things of that nature. Mine is www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. It is, I'll have more information up there for you to take a look at and learn a little bit more about that. And I do want to mention that there are other fine programs on the X Zone Broadcast Network at xzbn.net. So we'll be back right after this, so please stick around. I am here with John Greenewald and Tony Bragalia. We're talking UFOs, government documents, FOIAs, and a whole bunch of stuff like that. Once again, the websites are where John Greenewald is www.theblackvault.com, and for Tony Bragalia, it is www.ufoexplorations.com. When we went away, Tony was wrapping up his discussion here. John, I know you had a comment that you would like to make, so jump in with it, would you please?
Yeah, I mean, I think the lawsuit and the word threat is extreme semantics. I mean, I chuckled when Tony was referring back to the conversation he had with the FOIA officer, and when he brought up the lawsuit, even the FOIA officer, according to Tony, said, "Hey, I got people that call me all the time and threaten lawsuits, but I'm going to work with you." So why we're stuck up on that word, I'm not really sure. The fact remains, the lawsuit changes things, and not for the better. I truly believe that. If Tony felt that he got a response months later and that was all because he dropped the L word, cool. I mean, all the more power to him. But it again goes to the root why I believe that maybe the communication is a little lacking, because at this point they fulfilled their legal obligation. And yet again, Tony is making the argument that he was so clear with the FOIA officer on what his request was, but he still doesn't want to address multiple citable examples. And I'm not beating the dead horse here because I want to, but rather the dead horse is being beaten by Tony as the foundation of his argument. So until he can explain why I can show those same exact examples, but I'm not going to go running around touting Nazi Horton brother design as flying saucer UFO alien material, I'm all ears. But until then, that foundation just is not strong.
Well,
I'll tell you. Okay.
Let me take the conversation a little bit different direction, Tony.
Can I respond to that at all?
Okay, respond to it quickly, please.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say it's really rich from someone who's been filing for FOIAs for 25 years to have never filed a lawsuit. I think it's very telling on several different levels. You have a very nice, some would say cozy relationship with the government agencies to get these FOIA dumps. So it doesn't surprise me that you've never had to or even considered apparently initiating, not threatening a lawsuit.
Tony, we've beaten that dead horse.
You got it.
We've beaten that dead horse quite a bit here, and I'm going to say I've been filing FOIA requests for 25 years, and I've never initiated a lawsuit either, and I've gotten what I wanted, sometimes years later, but not what I wanted. But you've come out with some pretty strong statements in the past that I think have harmed your credibility somewhat. I'm thinking of your take on Herbert Dick, and I know I'm taking a curve here, but I think it's illustrative. You've put up on your website at ufoexplorations.com an article about the plains of San Augustine, and in that you talk about Herbert Dick, who was an archaeologist, anthropologist who was working on the plains of San Augustine in July of 1947. And I'll get to my point. I can hear the judge in the background saying relevance. What you did on your website, you mentioned that Herbert Dick categorically denied he had ever worked around the plains of San Augustine region in July of 1947. And then you later say it turns out that Dick lied to these researchers being me, by the way, when he was interviewed by them. And you kept talking about how his lies were used to cover up his involvement, and that Art Campbell found a document in the Harvard Library.
The late Art Campbell, who I conversed with, and I shared this with you.
Yes.
And he put the article up on from the Harvard archive, where Dick said that he was somewhere else that he wasn't.
No, Tony, I talked to the guy.
Okay.
I talked to him.
I don't know how this is relevant to.
Because
I don't have what you're talking about before me, and
Tony,
I'd like to continue because we're going like way. I don't.
Tony, I will get there.
Okay.
Thank you. What my point is is you have called Herbert Dick a liar. You say that he claims he was categorically denied he was ever worked around the plains of San Augustine.
Right. We showed the documentation, Art Campbell and I, from the Harvard archives. You saw it.
Don't make me mute you.
Kevin, I don't know what you're. Okay. Wow.
Yes, because you keep
Are
interrupting
you
me.
okay? Are you?
Listen,
Okay,
Tony,
go ahead.
shut up and listen. Thank you. My
I'll
point,
talk to you later, Kevin. Thank you.
Well, that
John, it's
Yeah.
now you and me. For those who are listening, the point was that I had talked to Herbert Dick. Tony had said that he was a liar. He never talked to the guy. He came out with this very strong and very bold language about a man he never talked to. Herbert Dick told me he had been on the plains of San Augustine in July of 1947. The problem was he didn't remember the day he got there. And that's what Art Campbell discovered, was that he had gotten there on July 1st, which becomes relevant to the discussion of a UFO crash on the plains of San Augustine, because Dick was there in a position to have observed it. And I wanted to get all of this with Tony simply because it shows the strong language he uses and how his opinions are morphed into, I guess, his belief structure. And when I asked him about it, he said that these denials had been reported in the early 1990 issues of the IUR, International UFO Reporter. I asked Tony about it, and he said he couldn't come up with the reference. He didn't have the reference. And I can tell you it's not there because I talked to Herbert Dick. Herbert Dick was very clear on that he had worked on the plains of San Augustine in July of 1947. What Art Campbell did was pin down the exact date. Tony did not allow me to get to that point. And that's where I was going with it, to show that there have been instances where Tony has been wrapped up in his mantle of boldness, suggesting things that turned out to not be true. He didn't talk to Herbert Dick. I did. That's where I was going with it, John. So any comment?
And now that I've heard your complete thought, I mean, I think it does play into the bigger picture. And I wish that Tony would stick it out and give his side. But one thing that I've noticed after doing these shows with you and him and my own show with him is that he has become very, dare I say, masterful at dodging the actual question. And he goes into trying to prove his point with something because I believe he truly believes what he's talking about is true. And same with the example that you just gave, which I just kind of heard for the first time in detail. Another example that I would throw in there, which I know he doesn't like to talk about, is the Roswell slides.
John, let me interrupt you just before we get into that. I wanted to say I've got an article that I will put up on my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com that covers this whole Plains of San Augustine thing and Herbert Dick, so that the people can get the whole picture of that. I think Tony published the article in 2010. You were mentioning the Roswell slide, so let's go there.
And again, I mean, I wish he was here because this is all stuff that I would bring up to him and say, look, there have been instances, it sounds like with what you just gave, Roswell slides is another prime example that I think after so many years, and Tony's not the only one that would fall victim to this. I'm sure, you know, yourself, you want to believe something, you're going to try and find connections to make your belief a reality. And I think Roswell slides with Tony is a prime example. And again, the story that you just gave. When it comes to the debate at hand with these FOIA requests, I truly believe his long history in memory metal kind of is the same exact thing, where he wants this to be confirmation of decades of long work for him. And that's fine. I mean, I wish we could have a calm conversation about that, but for him to leap and say what he has said, and the foundational argument, and forgive me just to cite this one more time, but that foundational argument, because it all hinges on, according to Tony, it all hinges on that FOIA request. And if that is true, if that's his only argument, then sadly, you can just tear that down very easily. And I think that I've probably asked him through your show and mine 5 times to address it, and he never did. And that's that masterful, well, I'm going to talk about Susan Goff, and I'm going to insinuate John Greenewald is just sitting there like a pawn waiting for documents to come his way and fall on his lap. And he even was a lot more strongly worded on my show, essentially saying that I was like this government stooge. And it's like, it's funny to laugh at. And I even laughed in my show when he just kept trying to nail that point and it was falling very short. But again, he needs to believe that to make all the other claims that he's making true. And that's where I had talked about in your last show about what I call the I want to believe syndrome. When you want to believe so bad, you will only take the bits and pieces that support your final conclusion because your mind is already made up. And I can't tell you how many, I'm only speaking for myself here, but I'm sure this may apply to you as well, Kevin, where when you research something, you may have your theories and opinions. I know I have, but when more evidence comes out, those theories and opinions will shift. And sometimes later you'll draw an absolute downright stone cold conclusion that can never, be faltered because the evidence is solid. But as a researcher and investigator, you pursue that and you shift a little bit. With Tony, again, I would say this to him if he would let anybody talk. That is what I believe is going on here. And if his foundation is just that request, then it's fallen to pieces. But you can see he doesn't want to look at that. He only wants to look at the evidence that we have. Now, I don't want to just pick on Tony. That is true in a very wide array throughout what we would call the UFO community, where people from well-known to just people that are getting their feet wet, they want to believe X, Y, and Z. And so they will find the evidence to draw that to be true versus taking the totality of the evidence. And in my opinion, Tony, in this debate, is not taking the totality of the evidence. He likes to be a little bit condescending when it comes to other people's lack of knowledge. I've never claimed to be a scientist, and I just don't. To be honest with you, I don't care about the molecular structure of nitinol because that's not going to prove alien to me. And I think that he was stuck on that he knows better than everyone else. Ergo, if he says it's alien, it's alien. The totality of the evidence in my mind is dealing with his foundation and the foundational argument that he's trying to make, and he will not ever allow anyone else to challenge that. And I think that's sad. It's a bad approach, and it's one that has gotten him in trouble before, especially with those Roswell slides, especially with what you had just referenced, and I think it's gotten him in trouble now.
Well, I do want to say I shouldn't have told him to shut up, but I was getting a little frustrated because he wouldn't let me finish the point. I think he may have known where I was going with it. And I was using that point to illustrate basically the Roswell slides because I had agreed with him that I wouldn't mention the Roswell slides when I interviewed him on the program because it wasn't relevant to where I needed to go. Yeah. So it wasn't a big concession on my point. I wanted to talk to him about this material and what was going on here. And I think that the point I was trying to make through that, and I think you understood that well and everybody else does, is that he has gotten caught up in these kinds of things before, and this was an example of it, and he won't listen to other people's opinions. He talked about Exxon and the titanium. I can't find the references in my books that Exxon ever said anything about titanium. It may be there and I just missed it. I don't remember him talking about it. If it appears, I will of course put it up on my blog where everybody can see that sort of thing and understand that that was just something I forgot. I do find references to material coming into Wright Field, I guess at the time, for analysis at their laboratories there. I do find those references, and that's the problem. I think Tony leaps to conclusions without a good foundation in the evidence. And I see in Witness to Roswell, he talks about titanium in reference to his research there, and I think he is connected the titanium to Exxon in some fashion. When we come back, I want to ask you, I saw something just the other day that seemed that you were endorsing part of Tony's thing about the Pentagon admitting something, and I want to get back to that when we come back. So I think that's an important point that we need to talk about as well. You are listening to A Different Perspective on the X Zone Broadcast Network, so please stick around. I am back with my guest, John Greenewald. For those of you who've been paying attention and keeping score at home, we lost one of our guests in the last segment. I do want to apologize. I shouldn't have told him to shut up. I was just frustrated with him constant interrupting and not letting me get to the point. And I think the point would have been understandable, at least to everybody but him, when we got to it. When we went away, I had mentioned that I'd seen something in the last day or two, John, where you were talking about, or you posted something about the Pentagon confirming a report that had just come out. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and actually, I think kind of leads into the arguments that we've been talking about the last couple of episodes. But in short, some material has leaked out in the form of some photographs, briefing slides, and a night vision video that was taken by the U.S. Navy, or at least that's how the story was presented. Some of the material was put out and published by George Knapp, who obviously has a long history of that type of material coming out. He obviously has sources, many of which will feed him information. The second set of information came the next day by Jeremy Corbell, and that was when the video had surfaced of this night vision. In my opinion, just at first glance, the video was much more interesting. Videos are always going to be more interesting just because you have some moving images and potentially more information that you can analyze. So I had immediately reached out because the moment that the DoD is mentioned, I always go after official material, not only through FOIA, but you touch base with a spokesperson and you want to see what they would say, if anything. And most of the time with UFOs, they don't have anything to say. To my surprise, they had confirmed to me Friday evening that the material was taken by the U.S. Navy and that it was being utilized by the UAP task force, which I was surprised about. And I immediately wrote an article, a rather quick one, and published it Friday night. And that obviously made quite a few headlines. And then through the weekend, it made it a much bigger story because when they originally published the information, there was no official confirmation. They're all considered leaks. Unclassified, so they say, but leaks nonetheless, because as you know, Kevin, for official use only still needs some type of a vetting process for it to come out. So this material was confirmed. What I couldn't get confirmation on, and this is why I feel it connects to our debate that we've had these last couple of shows, is what they wouldn't commit to, which was saying that they were unidentified. And as we well know throughout history and Project Blue Book, they did have a primer, a reference desk, so to speak, of known objects that investigators could reference. And although I don't know if this is or isn't that, I think that we have to rule that out. And so I tried to get the Pentagon to say, okay, do you guys consider this unidentified, or are you utilizing this in the UAP task force briefings, but as an example of, look, this is what a balloon looks like at 30,000 feet. Look, this is what a aircraft with a triangular aperture on a night vision camera looks like. What are you guys trying to say? And they wouldn't commit to anything. So we don't know. And why I feel it connects to this debate very quickly is a lot of people, journalists, researchers, curious minds, will immediately connect this to either being alien or a true UFO. Sadly, we don't have that connection yet, but it's that I want to believe thing again where, well, if the Pentagon says they're authentic, then the story we're being told by this news outlet or this blog or whomever has to be true. And it very well may be. The Navy could come out tonight, for all I know, and say, yes, we'll admit it. Those are unidentified, but we don't have it there. But many are leaping to that. And that's where any investigator knows you have to step towards a conclusion. You can't leap. And I think that that's what we see a lot in the UFO community, where we just leap to conclusions. You get 10% of the story, and then when you talk about it, you think you know 100% of it. And I think that that's the exact same issue that we're dealing with the debate on whether or not this is UAP material that Tony Bragalia has come out with, or whether or not Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp's information is truly unidentified. We're just missing pieces of the puzzle.
Well, I think when we were discussing this before, you mentioned the possibility there are drones, some kind of drone project that the Navy might not have been aware of, but a testing of drones or something like that, and we might be moving toward not disclosure of UFO material, but disclosure of drone technology as it is improving. And I think that's kind of an interesting thing. So you have something that's unidentified, might be a drone, might be an alien spacecraft, but you don't know exactly what it is. And that's the very definition of an unidentified flying object. You don't know what it is.
Exactly. And where I think, I don't believe drones explain all of the UFO phenomena. I do think that there's something more to it. But when it comes to the UAP task force and the DOD's side, what I think is going to happen is they are going to play up the drone angle. And what many people aren't talking about is in the leaked briefing slides, which the Pentagon says all of it is genuine or authentic. In there, in the actual description, it talks about UAS. So we know that that's unmanned aerial system, which is essentially a drone. And they're not even labeling them, like I'm looking at one of the slides, it's not labeled as a UAP, which is unidentified aerial phenomena, but rather they are talking about these objects being UASs, unmanned aerial systems. What's very interesting is it ties into Luis Elizondo's paperwork, getting the 3 videos that has kind of started this whole hoopla in the last 3 years plus about UAPs and UFOs and Pentagon secret programs and so on and so forth. That internal paperwork also makes reference to UASs and drones. And a lot of people have tried to change what UAS means to unidentified aircraft system or aerial system. Per the DOD, it's unmanned aerial system. That is what UAS is. They have never changed that acronym. So even in the UAP task force briefing, should, again, all of this be absolutely 100% genuine, and it looks like it is, they are calling these slides UASs, in essence, drones. Some people have tried to make the argument, well, they don't know what else to call them. Well, it's UAP, if that's what they're trying to call it. We know that is a designation. So,
well, John, to be fair, I've seen documents where they're talking about unidentified helicopters. I think in Loring Air Force Base in the 1960s or 70s, and they were referring to them as unidentified helicopters intruding on their airspace, and they were using helicopters to kind of disguise the object because they didn't want to admit it was something they couldn't control. It was just some kind of an unidentified helicopter. So I think sometimes they do apply terms to UFOs. Yeah, in a way to kind of disguise exactly what they're talking about.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's an excellent point that I'm glad you brought up. My only counter to that, if I were to counter at all, would be the time frame of the 1970s reports and the helicopters versus now, where in 1969 we know in the very early parts of 1970 UFO investigations were done, yet they were still happening, as we know, with these unidentified helicopters. So for me, I look at that and go, okay, the time frame makes sense for them to shield what they're talking about. But now they're briefing on UAPs, where it's a terminology that they're utilizing. They are designating videos that we know for a fact are UAPs. What they are, alien aircraft or whatever, we don't know that yet, but the Navy has put it in writing that UAP is a designation. So that to me is kind of the most striking difference between 1970s, where they didn't admit to anything. They said, hey, UFOs are no threat to us. And yet here they are going on to air bases and restricted areas. But fast forward to 2021, the conversation for them has changed a little bit. Now they are saying that they're looking into unidentified flying objects or unidentified aerial phenomena. So you bring up an excellent point, but there is a slight difference on their stance and their approach, so to speak, because they are a little bit more loose about it now than they were in the 1970s.
Well, I would say that the change of the designation to UAP was because UFO has come to mean alien spacecraft. So if you say it's a UFO, everybody immediately goes to that point. It's an alien spacecraft. So if you've got an UAP, well, you don't go there immediately. You're looking at an unidentified aerial phenomena, and it doesn't have the connotation unidentified flying object suggests something is flying, and it's an object, where UAP is just said it's some kind of phenomena in the sky. So I think that's a way of avoiding that default setting.
Yeah. I mean, and admittedly, there's just a lot of confusion around this phenomena as a whole, because they are talking about UAPs and so on now versus decades ago. So it's the conversation has changed. But then again, these drones, going back to your original question, keep coming up in, according to this leak, a classified briefing. And then in relation to the Luis Elizondo documents that he filed on the videos, also labeled as drones. So you could absolutely be right. They're just shielding UAP like UFO. But I don't, that's a tough argument to make today. But again, it's just because there's so much confusion around all of this. They will admit so much, in my mind. You know, they've come out with a lot of stuff on an official level, admitting to a UAP task force and looking into UFOs and UAPs and so on and so forth. And yet they continue to deny, let's say, Luis Elizondo's involvement in ATIP, and they deny that ATIP had anything to do with UFOs. I can't figure out the motive for that. I mean, you know, when you look at government secrets and conspiracies and so on, I always look for motive, because it really kind of helps you figure out why they would do X, Y, or Z. And in this one, I don't really have a great answer, because the cat's out of the bag. They're admitting they've looked into it. They've admitted that they've made mistakes on statements prior. So it's like, if you've admitted to mistakes prior, when you make statements, and when you admit that you're looking into UFOs, why can't you just say, okay, you know what, ATIP did have some UFO elements to it, or Luis Elizondo did have the program, oops, we made a mistake. And that's where this whole confusion thing is. And I'm not trying to change the conversation to Luis Elizondo, but my point is that's how much confusion is there. Are we really talking about UASs? Are they shielding UAPs? Why would they feel the need to do that in a classified briefing document that they felt wouldn't essentially be leaked, or at least shouldn't be leaked? And those are all questions I don't have answers to. But
I think in today's world, the Pentagon should expect everything to be leaked, because everything leaks. I think if you're looking for motives, and I hesitate to do this because it's really commercial for my book, UFOs in the Deep State, but I think the Deep State may have part of this. I think if you're looking at the Deep State as a shadow government, it is a very distinct possibility. It's an attempt to divert attention and retain power, and that's what it's all about, is retaining the power. And we intrude on that a little bit with our UFO research and that sort of thing. John, I'm out of time. I got to thank you for sticking around with me.
Oh, as always, you know, I always enjoy talking to you, and I'm sorry the debate part ended the way it did, but
that was probably my fault. I should have told him, I should have had him muted and made the point from there on. But I lost control for a moment, and I apologize to the audience for doing that. But I think it was deserved as well. John, your website is www.theblackvault.com. Anything interesting coming up in the next 10 seconds you can tell me about?
Very quickly, a couple stories dropping, which I am finishing up now, waiting for final word, official word from the Pentagon, but they are very, very interesting, to just give a little bit of a tease. Other than that, always new documents, always new stuff. So definitely check it out.
Hey, thank you, John. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Kevin. You have a wonderful day. Thanks again.
You too. We've been talking to John Greenewald here. We were also talking to Tony Bragalia before he hung up on us about many, many different things. As I say, there'll be a long article about the Herbert Dick material on my blog here. It would be on the blog now, actually, so that you can take a look at that. I will be back in 167 hours with another episode of A Different Perspective. We'll talk to you then.